Hi, everyone. That was quite embarrassing. Thanks, Mary. Today I'm going to talk about how at Verve we grew our team from about 10 to 35 engineers in the last 18 months. And I guess we're going to start that story where we started kind of changing our current hiring process, and we're about 10 of us at a time. We knew that we're going to start hiring quite rapidly and growing our team, and we wanted to make sure that we're not going to start making bad decisions just because we need people to join our team urgently. At the time, also, personally, I was transitioning from full-time engineering role into engineering management, and I was feeling quite anxious, and I didn't really trust my gut on instinct on making hiring decisions. I wanted to get a lot more nerdy and scientific about this and kind of do the kind of same decisions I make when coding, when hiring. So I wanted to be able to look into data and apply very clear criteria for it to be measurable and for it to be a fair process for everyone and all of our candidates. Because then I felt like if we make a wrong decision, which we're always going to make because that's hiring, there is an actionable postmortem we can do, there is a retro, we can change our process, we can get better at it, we can evaluate and change criteria or how we ask questions to make sure we get better over time. And that meant the entire thing started to feel a lot more like a system that we can play with and work on improving than a necessary evil that we need to go through to hire and grow our team. So there's a couple of objectives that we looked at when redesigning this process to make sure, have some guiding principles that are always going to be in the back of our mind when we're changing this process. So first, at Verve, we truly believe that diverse teams lead to better results. So that was our main principle, and we wanted the process to be inclusive. I guess we believe that for most people, the best perk of a company is not a free ping pong table or snacks, but the best people and being able to learn from others at your workplace. Wanted to make sure we hire the best people, which meant eliminating that bias of not letting everyone through our process equally. And also, I guess, the nice thing about this, it also helped me eliminate this anxiety of having to make that decision without much experience making those before, because we then have facts and data rather than opinions and instincts and gut feelings. Being a fairly small startup at the time, we also didn't have a big name behind us, and we knew that excellent quality of experience that are going through with us during the interview process must be our priority. Because if candidates are evaluating us against bigger, more known companies that have huge budgets behind them, we have to be different. We have to be faster and more personal and more authentic and more friendly, and I guess show our best selves. So that was an important thing for us as well. Sorry, I think I clicked the slide too early, but we're back on it. And then the last objective there was that we need to hire the right candidate for us. Because I guess in my previous experience, whenever we made a bad hiring decision, it was never because the candidate was a bad candidate in general. There's not really bad people who are going to do their job, maybe a few. But it was always a wrong environment. So they'll probably be much more successful if they went to a different company where maybe they are a bit bigger, or maybe that company that moves either slower or faster than Verve. So that was another thing for us to make sure that process works for us and isn't just blindly following what everyone else is doing. Now that slide. So this is no, I'm messing up the slides. This is the process we went through. So first, we looked at defining who the right candidate is and building the pipeline. And that's going to be the first part of my talk that I'm going to walk you through. The next thing is designing how you gather and evaluate information, and then making sure you set up your candidate for success to make sure you capture the best people. So we're going to start with defining your candidate and by building a pipeline. You'll typically take your median successful engineer and try to find a clone of them. So you could look at their CV and figure out, they had 6 years of working with Python, and maybe they attended this school, or they're fluent in multiple languages, or they played rugby in school. And then you're trying to take those patterns and apply them to find candidates who will be similar to them. However, this way you're already designing your process to eliminate a huge portion of your market, because you're missing all the people who still can do their job and will be a huge asset to your team, but they worked a different path in life. Maybe they don't have a degree, but have been coding since they've been 7. And so you want to make sure that by listing those requirements, you're never eliminating people who are not walking the same path, and hence also have a more diverse background for your team. There's some studies as well about women who always look at job descriptions and only apply if they meet 100% of criteria. So you want to make sure you're not listing things that are not important for you. The best indicator of someone performing well in the job is the evidence that they've done a similar work in a similar environment before with success. If you think about hiring and you're trying to make a hiring decision, it's always much easier if you already know the person because you've worked with them, because you know that they're good at their jobs and you've seen them do that job with success. And then all of the degrees and previous experience doesn't matter as much as the fact that they can do that job. So our goal is to replicate the same experience but in an interview. The reason I mentioned environment as being something that's really important is because the work someone is doing as a senior engineer in a company A might be very different if it's a tech giant. Maybe at that company they don't have to test their own code. Maybe they're just given a very well-described tickets of what they have to implement. Maybe they don't have to care about on-call or documentation and all of that stuff, whereas a senior engineer at a tiny startup might be asked to do all of those things, as well as help with hiring and help with recruiting, or things like designing a roadmap. So you want to take that into account as well. So the first thing you actually want to do is to define what the job is, and then hire people who have done it before, rather than designing who those people are and who you think, what kind of light they have to lift before applying for your job. We call this a performance profile, and an example of this may look something like what you see on the screen now. So you drop all of your typical 6 years of that, 8 years of that requirements, and instead list a number of things they're expecting to do when they join your company. And you also want to make sure that you know what the success looks like for them. So if they're going to be asked to deliver features from discovery all the way to production, you want to know how you're going to measure their success doing so. This lets you, when candidates are seeing a job description that looks like this, they can always self-select out of the process, because maybe that's something they can do, but maybe don't want to do. And then once you've done that, just publish it on your website. Don't keep it private, because you don't really want to waste time talking to candidates who are not really interested in the job you're offering. The thing we are doing at Verve as well, we are being transparent about how much this role pays at our company. It doesn't make sense for us to invest hours into process with someone if the salary expectations are already mismatched, because that's just a waste of time for both us and the candidate. And then I guess what we also believe is paying the same people for the same job, as long as they can do this job equally. So the hard part that comes in, that you have to actually get your candidates in the door. And I guess the common trope is that we only want the best candidates, and every company they're going to interview with is going to tell you that. We believe that our interview process gives us that. So what we want to do is try to attract the widest possible slice of society, so that we can increase the chances of actually getting the best candidate into the pipeline in the first place. To be able to attract a diverse audience, there's one hard thing you have to do, which is making sure that the company you work for has inclusive practices and can support diverse candidates in not only welcoming them and have them becoming part of the team, but also being successful and getting recognized and promoted at your company. So if your company is already a fairly homogeneous culture, you're going to have a lot of trouble attracting those candidates, because you're going to have to do so much more to prove that people who are different to you are also successful at the company. So I would recommend that what you start doing first is making sure you hire diverse candidates on the very leadership positions, rather than hiring only juniors or interns. And then I guess, not really going to lie, building a diverse pipeline, especially if you're not known for those things, is going to be fairly hard. So you're going to have to put in the work and actively and authentically reach out to people and present genuine evidence, not just saying that you're a great place to work, but show how you're making that a great place to work for them, and a place that not only welcomes those people, but also sets them up for success later. So now you've got candidates coming through your door, and you need to start thinking about how you're going to evaluate them. So that's the, I guess, more fun part. The first thing to think about is what information do you actually need to evaluate that you're going to be able to do your job. And if we believe that the best indicator of success is pure success doing the same job in a similar environment, then all you need to do is really gather evidence that they can do that. The way we designed this is we make sure that our process is really fast and efficient and optimizing for good candidates' experience, but also really relevant to what they will be doing rather than trying to find out kind of patterns and indicators that they could be doing those things. For example, like if your employees don't need to be able to code or write code on the whiteboard in your office while 6 other people are watching them, then I don't think that's the right way to test that they're going to be able to do your job. So our process looks like this. I'm going to get a bit more into detail here. So we first going to have fun with them, because there's only so much you can learn from someone's CV to figure out whether what you're actually offering to them is something that they're looking for, and vice versa. And asking someone to invest hours of their time to interview with you and go through hoops and loops means that they have to be genuinely excited about you. Because I guess nowadays candidates get multiple companies that they're usually interviewing with. You're not the only one they're investing their time with. So you really want them to get excited about your job and your role and your company. And this is a great opportunity to do that. We then ask them to do a technical test at home. The way this works, we make sure that we don't ask them for too much. So we always suggest to our candidates that they only spend about 3 hours of their time, rather than weeks or days completing the test. At Verve, we're building web applications using Python, React, and GraphQL. So to get evidence that someone can do that, we ask them to solve a similar problem that they would get maybe in their first week at the job, like a very simple version, minimized version of it, using those tools that we are using at Works every day. And to make it even more relevant, and that's actually probably our favorite part, we also ask them to write a code review of the little code base that we are sending them. Because I guess we believe that writing code is as important as mentoring others and helping others grow. So we want to see how they interact with people. And even I guess if you're looking at the code base, you can, the solutions people send us through are usually fairly similar, but different people pick up different things in code review, and you can learn a lot about how in-depth their knowledge is about what kind of things they look at during code review. So that's a part that we get a lot of value from. That I guess was fairly unexpected for us. It was a bit of an experiment. We then make sure that we both take the time to review their test, as well as provide them with useful feedback about things they've done well and things they could have done better within a day, rather than having them wait for weeks to hear back from us. So we have a tiny little process internally to make sure that happens efficiently and fast. Because I guess if we believe that people are investing their time and doing something for us that will help us evaluate them, we want to make sure they get something from it as well, and they don't have to wait days for it to come back to them. And that's something a lot of candidates are actually really grateful for as well, especially if they learned something through it. We then go to an interview. So after the coding test, if everything looks good to us, we invite them to come in for an interview. And because London commute times can get quite high, we do 2.5 hours, and we do it all one after another. So that consists of 2 interviews, and that we do all together to, again, respect their time and make sure that the time they're spending with us is the most efficient for them. So typical interview consists of us outlining how our interviews work and what we are looking for to kind of put them more at ease and don't feel stressed, that they know what they're expecting during that time with us. And then we are having the candidate walk us through their work history as in their CV. During that, we are trying to gather relevant evidence of them being successful at what they like this kind of job that we're looking for them to do, and make sure that they've been doing it in enough similar environment to us. Because I guess as an example, someone who has been successful in a company with like a whole QA department and maybe no DevOps that releases code every 6 months doesn't necessarily have applicable experience to us, where we ask engineers to support their own code, test it, and ship features a couple of times a day. However, I think the biggest thing that made a difference in the way we're interviewing is how we're asking questions. So instead of asking, how do you approach problem, like breaking down this big problem into smaller bits so that a junior engineer can tackle them, we instead ask them, tell us about a moment in the past where you've been working on a project and how you've broken it down into smaller pieces to be tackled by junior engineers. This way we get actual stories and we get actual evidence and actual information about problems they've encountered and challenges, rather than like a theoretical knowledge about that they've read on the internet but haven't actually tried themselves. And you can use this framework of like, tell us about the time you did X to almost any question, whether it's about culture or environment or programming. So once all of that is over, you have to make a decision. And at that point, you want to make sure you're making an objective decision based on data. So all of us have some biases. And we went with a couple of ways to try and minimize them as much as possible. So during our coding test, we do a blind code review. The way this works is actually on the screenshot. So once a hiring manager receives the test back from the candidate, they make sure to upload it to GitHub, to our like a central code testing repository. But they also make sure to remove any personal information of the person who's been doing the test from that pull request. That means that whoever is reviewing the code have no idea who actually written that code. And that helps out a lot to make sure that we're not biasing against specific criteria that someone can have in mind. We've also set up this simple spreadsheet that we copy for each candidate. And that allows us to make sure that each engineer who reviews the coding test incoming from candidates, and we have almost our entire team can do this, as we want to make sure it's efficient and we can do it in a day. That allows us to keep consistency and make sure that people who are reviewing the coding test always review them in the same way, and not based on like a personal preference. So we always ask for like evidence that they've done certain things in that coding test or in the code review. At the interview stage, having a representative panel is really important. This allows you to make sure you're getting a representative opinion in the decision-making process. We, again, follow an objective scorecard here, outlining what evidence we need to make a decision, as well as the evidence we gather during the process. We usually, during the interview, have one lead who kind of is focused on driving the conversation forward and make sure we touch on the right things. And then a panel of people who are just focusing on listening and taking notes, and often also writing down like actual wording of the examples someone gave us during the interview, and also ensuring that we ask enough questions to let the candidate like really shine. So a typical scorecard could look something like this. We're slowly switching to using Notion for this. So we usually have a couple of factors that we want to evaluate. We assign owners to those, so that during the interview, if we have a panel of 3 people, everyone can just focus on a subset of things rather than having to listen and look for an entire range of criteria that we are interested in. And that makes the panel a lot more effective, and those people a lot more effective as well. We designed our scoring on a 1 to 5 scale, with a score of 3 meeting the necessary criteria. So if we then score someone a 4, we know they're exceeding the kind of requirements that we have for that level. For example, for a mid-level developer in the score of team skills, we could be looking for them being able to collaborate in a team, examples of them being delivering small features on production while collaborating with a Scrum Master and a product owner and designer in a team, that they need to be able to receive and give feedback to their teammates or participate in things like retros, with examples where they said something during a retro and that actually then went on to improve something in the team. For a senior, the same requirements for the same factor could be also that they are able to lead a team or a project, or they're able to navigate some or resolve personal conflicts in the team. When we give a score of 4 to someone, and on average across the whole scorecards, they are scoring above what we expected for them on that role they applied for, we often give them that higher role as well. And then comes the debrief. For us, I think the most important thing is that the hiring manager ensures that we always collect and write down factual evidence rather than opinions from the interviewing panel. So at least it's really important for us, and I think at the beginning, especially as we're getting used to that process, that there is always like a one person in the room who is really like drilling everyone for the examples and the evidence of things they've heard, rather than like whether I think it's good or not. So that was quite important to be able to have someone in the room who was kind of playing that role of, I'm going to find out all the evidence, and that also meant that people who were coming to that debrief were prepared and like usually try to like defend their score to make sure they have enough evidence supporting that score. The fun part was that I guess 6 months in, we started using the same scorecard and the same rubric for evaluating both candidates as well as employees who are working at Verve. Because I guess if we believe that we are hiring for the job that everyone else at the company is already doing, there's not really a reason for us to evaluate performance on the job differently to what we are expecting at the interview stage. And I guess it's also quite interesting to see where we missed when we thought we got some evidence that then actually wasn't really present in the job, and also being able to see people progress and learn how they, in their time at Verve. So that's interviewing. But I guess I've mentioned quite a bit about how we are always trying to make the candidate's experience better, so I'm going to talk quite shortly about that. London market is incredibly competitive when it comes to hiring, and I'm sure that's true for a lot of major cities. So candidates usually evaluate you as much as you evaluate them, providing a great experience in an industry that's kind of bad at hiring and kind of bad at setting up processes and making a bit of a game for people to go through to be able to get hired. Means that this can be like a huge differentiating factor for people to choose between you and others. So you want to make the hiring decision on a real picture of candidate's ability rather than a stressed, a nervous version of them that they are in the interview, because interviews are usually stressful for most people. It's definitely most stressful than their daily jobs are going to be in the future, and most people don't really perform that at their best when they are stressed. So it's in your interest to minimize that stress, put the candidate at ease, and kind of also take the stress out of equation when making the hiring decision, because some of our best candidates, our best engineers at Verve, were actually the ones that were the most stressed during the interview. There are some simple things you can do to provide a great experience. And like even something as simple as letting the candidates set a preferred time for the interview so they can fit that alongside their other commitments in life, letting them know what they can expect from the interview without creating like a artificial deadline on accepting an offer to drive them to like accept it fast and don't evaluate you against other companies is something that a lot of companies are currently doing. And I don't think that's in anyone's interest, because I think you want to hire people who really want to work for you rather than people who just made that decision because you made them to do it fast. We also make sure, and I think that's probably the biggest point for us, is getting back to candidates quickly. Because other companies can take weeks to get back to someone after the interview or a coding test. And we also always provide them with like useful, actionable feedback, and people are usually quite grateful for that. I think the moment we kind of realized that all that like care and extra time we were putting in with each candidate was worth it when we had a candidate who interviewed with us, went through the process, got an offer, got a better offer somewhere else, and then recommended us to others because of how kind of good their experience was interviewing with us. So that was a cool moment for us. So I guess the last thing I want to leave you with is a small encouragement to take a fairly iterative, small steps approach to changing how you hire. Like if you implement at least one tiny thing tomorrow, you're gonna massively be ahead of all the other companies. So maybe you wanna get really clear on what success looks like for someone doing this job, and that's probably the hardest part actually of this whole list here. Or maybe you can start blind reviewing your coding test tomorrow, or even have just a clear criteria that you're measuring everyone in your pipeline against, and create some spreadsheet templates and stuff like that. All of those small things are going to then kind of accumulate to a bigger change in your process, because you can continuously then iterate and change one small thing at a time that's going to make a huge impact on how you build your team. And that's it. Thanks.